Hey, welcome to Gold's Garage. So today the theme of this video is buyer beware, and we're going to go through 2 or 3 examples of why you got to pay attention and do your homework when you buy parts, whether it's on the marketplace or Amazon or anywhere else, to make sure you get what you think, what you're paying for and what you think you're going to get. So just a little background. You probably recognize this engine before. This was Mike Kimball's budget build, and Mike sold it to another customer, Roland Cron, who Mike sold it without the heads, and Mike's original heads, Bill Little has them right now working on them for us. So Roland found a pair of heads on Marketplace, and let me just read you the description for it, and then he brought them to me to check them out. And let's see if we can find anything in here that's true. So I'm reading the ad on Marketplace. New stainless steel 202 valves, new seals, new springs and titanium retainers, 550 lift, 330 pounds off the seat pressure, 100 cc runners, 64 cc chambers, and 10-to-1 compression with flat top pistons. So we're going to go through the heads and see if we can find any of those things being true. I'm not sure if there's any, but by the way, since it's in the screen, this Will Casey's 350 small block. I got the oil pan painted, but we're still waiting. We talked about it in the last video. We're still waiting for the other seal power pistons that are going to give us a little more compression ratio. So we'll get back to that one. So how do you check out a set of heads? Before I forget, we're going to go through all the details of how we do that and come to some conclusions for you. Please like and subscribe before I forget. I read a very interesting statistic on YouTube the other day. YouTube gives us, if you're a creator, tons of data and analytics. One was that only 16% of people watching videos are subscribers to that channel. That means 17%. That means 83% of people watching it are not subscribers to that channel. Could you imagine if everybody watching this video who's not a subscriber subscribed for me? That would be just an amazing impact on my YouTube channel success. So I'm asking you to do that. It doesn't cost you anything to do that, but it would make an enormous change, benefit for me as a YouTube creator. So think about that, and likes are good too, of course. Okay, so back to the heads. Also, I'm going to have a tip of the day. So here's the beginning of it, and I'm going to give you the answer at the end. So the internal combustion engine is one of the most complex mechanical devices, the most precision mechanical devices in the world, and there have been hundreds of millions of them made. The small block Chevy alone, there's been more than 100 million copies of the small block Chevy made since 1955. So these engines were designed and refined by some of the smartest engineers in the world. So if you think you're going to outsmart them, you better make sure that you do your homework and you know what you're doing. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you a tip, give you some things that will help you to do that. So let's get back to the work at hand. So one of the first things we have to check out is whether the heads are leaking. If you watched my videos before, leaking cylinder heads has been the subject of some of them, including AFR heads. So I've actually checked both of them. I've got this one still on the engine so I can demonstrate that leak down for you. And this one is on my bench. We're going to remove a valve spring. I'm going to check a valve spring installed height. I'm going to check a valve spring force at installed height with the end of the valve open, and reveal a few things. So I've already done all but one of these valves. And one of the parts of the ad on Marketplace was it had new seals. It didn't have any seals. So that's the kind of thing you have to watch out for. And the other thing, I wanted to get this, I thought I would get this precision micrometer to measure installed height compared to the way I used to do it. And there's a story to be told about that too. It's a piece of junk. So I'll tell you all about that when we get back to it. So first of all, we're going to demonstrate this cylinder head is bolted on. This is how I do a leak down. There's just old head gaskets. And we do a leak down before we go any further. Because if the cylinders are leaking, the valves are leaking, there's no use going any further. So I've already checked both of them, and I've checked both of them, but I'm going to show you how or demonstrate how we do that. And we're going to put up a screenshot of Excel spreadsheet with the statistics that we got when we checked all 8 cylinders. So the compressor's turned on. We got 100 psi of air coming into my Moroso leak down tester. It's zeroed. Just adjust it there a little bit. Okay, at 0. It's pretty simple. Just put the air in it and it'll tell you what it's doing. So there we go. So when you hear me talk about leak down on my channel, this is what we're talking about. Let's just make sure my hose is nice and tight. So there we got about 15 or 16% leak down in this cylinder. And we're going to post with the video, once again, a screenshot of every cylinder. So that wasn't a bad number, just as a guideline. Using my tester, many engines over the years, 10% would be awesome, excellent. 15% is pretty good, and not more than 20%. Any more 20%, we get worried and got to do something about it. So 15 is not a bad number, and it might even improve after these heads supposedly were totally reconditioned by a local reputable and established machine shop, according to the information given to Roland. And so the rest of the numbers, I think we ended up averaging 16% overall leak down percentage, which is not bad. So the best I've ever seen, real precision engine. So a Leach Performance 602 race engine that's got a lot of detail, goes into the sealing of the rings and stuff, 10-11%. My Camaro, I did a spot check a while ago on one cylinder, it was 9%. So you don't see much better than that with this gauge. So there's different gauges and different ways to measure it. So that takes care of the leak down. I've actually done both heads, so I know they're usable, and we're going to go ahead and use them that way. Okay, one of the other things that's important to check out, I read off all the specs that were advertised on Marketplace. One of them was 64 cc combustion chamber volume. So I did do a check with my burette of a couple of cylinders, one in each head, and I took snapshots of it at the time because I didn't have anyone here to manage the camera for me. So I'm just going to kind of narrate it. So basically the issue is, as you can see from the snapshots, get the head level and square. And then basically fill the burette to 100 cc's and drain it down until the cylinder is full and measure what you got. And I may get a comment saying you should have had a plate on there. And I have used, just for what it's worth, that's the official plate you buy. I forget what I paid for this, way too much anyways. It's useless. The one that I do use sometimes has multiple holes. The problem is with the plate, the idea of it is that you don't have any meniscus. It's exactly flat, but it's very hard not to trap a little air bubble, and that affects your accuracy. So I find, I've done it both ways, works just as well if I just keep my eye on it and fill it till the cylinder's full. Anyway, that's the process. So the result was, these heads were advertised at 64 cc's. And they were 67 cc's. Now, could have been worse, because when you look up the chassis number for these cylinder heads, the listing in their commercial literature could be either 67 or 76. 76 would be way too much. We would not use it. It would take your compression ratio down to less than 9:1. And so that would not have been good. But anyway, they were 67. A couple cylinders checked is good enough. I know they're the right heads, at least for use. And we will lose a little. We're going to dyno this engine again, but compared to Mike's heads that he had on, we're going to lose a little bit of compression because slightly higher combustion chamber volume. But in summary, pretty much nothing in the ad was true. It didn't have seals. The combustion chamber volume was wrong. The spring pressures were wrong. Retainers weren't titanium. By the way, I didn't show it, but I weighed it against a retainer off the fast burn heads that I'm going to use on Will's engine. And these retainers weigh 11 grams. The retainers on Roland's heads are 28 grams. So the standard weight of a Chevrolet retainer is 28 grams. So they're not, in fact, if they were titanium, the retainers would probably be worth more than the heads. So for what it's worth. So buyer beware, that's the lesson learned. Now, having said all that, these heads are going to work okay. Nothing wrong with that. They just aren't what they're supposed to be. The leak down wasn't too bad. The springs actually, if they were what they were supposed to be, we wouldn't be able to use them. They'd be too strong. So you don't want to use any more spring on your camshaft than you need, because that's putting a force on the valve lifter, on the camshaft lobe all the time, and it'll tend to wear out your camshaft quicker. So 110, 100 pounds on the seat, 270, 280 open is fine, and we're going to be fine. We're going to put these heads together, install it with stainless steel shims, and Roland's going to be good to go. Let's get over here and look at the head itself. So this head is completely assembled. I've actually already had all these valves off. I saved the last one just for demonstration, just for the video, so I can show you my process. So the tool I use is a little different. This tool is actually made for taking valve springs off when the heads are on an engine in the car. And back in my super late model days, we had to change valves and check valves pretty routinely. And that's why I bought this tool 25 years ago. It's a Moroso tool as well. Lost the original handle, so it works. So I'm going to take this last valve off. In fact, the spreadsheet that we're going to show doesn't have this valve on it because I haven't done this one yet. So I wanted to save it for demonstration. So pretty simple. I've just got my head bolted to the bench. That's how I do it, just to hold it down. And use a little magnet here. Magnet picks up the keepers. Pull the spring off, and guess what? There's no oil seal at all. There's a little O-ring there, and that O-ring is actually broken. So it was useless anyway. This style of O-ring is intended to be used with shields, and I've already gone through this with the other ones. With these retainers, when the retainer goes in place when it's installed, it actually pushes the O-ring off of its seat. So basically that O-ring is useless. If we'd have run this engine the way it was, you probably would have had some smoke coming out the tailpipe, especially when it was shut off. The biggest problem with valve seals is on the intake side. If you shut your engine off and there's oil around there, it'll drain down into the engine, sit on the piston. When you start it up, you get a little puff of smoke. So that's what happens when you don't have valve seals. So the next thing is titanium retainers. So here's one of the retainers, and here's my gram scale. Let's turn it on. So a stock retainer weighs 28 grams, and so does this one. So it's not a titanium retainer. So there's another thing that didn't turn out to be as good as Roland expected. So I'm going to install new seals, and I'll show that. Before we're going to do that, we're going to check the installed height. Now, I have to take this tool off to do that. This takes a second to take it off. You haven't got room to work with it on there. So the way that I've always checked installed height, there's really a couple ways, is just using a little snap gauge and then my caliper. So we install the retainer, put the keepers back in place, Okay, just takes a second to do that. Oh, I dropped it. There, I got it. Keep her back in place. It's a little tricky, and I don't like doing it this way. That's why I thought buying the micrometer would really be the cool deal. I found this, usually they're pretty expensive. I found this on Amazon the other day, so I thought, you know what, for the video, it'll look more professional if I use a micrometer. Live and learn. So I'll show you the problem with the micrometer is. So you just fit your, you got to make sure you don't catch that you're on the base, okay, with the snap gauge. It's a little bit awkward, like I said. There we go. Tighten it up and measure it. And I don't like that number, so I'm going to check it again. It doesn't look right. Maybe I didn't tighten it enough. I got to check that again because that number doesn't look good. Well, that's the number I get again, 1.70. As the rest of them will show, I've checked every other one of them, and they're more like 1.72 or so. So 1.72 to 1.75. So that's the number, and you can see this, although it's awkward, it's pretty accurate. And make sure I had that belt pulled all the way up. Mike, maybe I didn't have it pulled all the way up. Maybe I'll have to fix this. Hang on. When checking, check till you get a number that makes sense. If you get a number, once again, I've already checked 7 of these, and it's not consistent, then you could be suspicious something's wrong. But I get 1.712 that time. Maybe I didn't. I have to make sure that you pull right up on the valve when you do it to make sure the valve's completely seated. And so 1.72, I'll record that. So then we take the spring. If we know 1.72, I'm going to come around the other side, Mike, I guess. So here's another buyer beware. I bought this device on Amazon as well. It wasn't cheap. There are nicer ones. They're very, very expensive. So it works. I make it work, but it's awkward to use. I'm not worried about the accuracy of it. It takes a lot more time. As you can see, the range of springs goes up to more than 4 inches. Now, when's the last time you saw a valve spring that was 4 inches high? And so why is that? It's probably an adaptation of some other kind of a tool. So what I do is I put a green masking tape at where the valve is closed and then where the valve is open and line it up. And the other thing about it is you got to line up the installed height on this side, and then you got to go around the other side to see the gauge. What were they thinking? Anyway, so let's go down to the installed height. There we go. And the gauge is at 110 pounds there, 115 pounds, I guess, right now, something like that. At installed height. So now we're going to go down to where the valve is completely open. Right there. And that's about 280 pounds. So the marketplace ad said 330 pounds, but I'm using the lift on this camshaft's 480 thousandths. So I've calculated the open pressure based on 480 thousandths. If you went to 550 thousandths, it might be a different number. So anyway, we were worried that these springs were going to be too big based on the marketplace ad, and we're going to have to go buy smaller springs. But they're fine. 100 pounds, 110 pounds on the seat, 280 pounds open. This is a 5,000, 5,200 RPM engine. And with that camshaft and everything, these springs will work okay. I've already had every one of these in and out. So the next thing is, so what have you established so far? I guess for purposes of demonstration, let me put the And I'm going to say it because it is. This is a Chinese micrometer, spring micrometer. The thought was nice. Okay, I'm got set up here. Sorry about that. I got the micrometer installed. That's the valve retainer that came off, same as these retainers. So the idea is you just unwind the valve retainer. There's a 0 point someplace here. There we go. Unwind the valve retainer until it's fully open. Find out where the 0 is. There we go. Should be turning that part. And that's 1.880. And when I measure with this, as clumsy and awkward as it is to use, it's 1.1 or 1.20. This is wrong. That's all there is to it. It's just wrong. And after I experienced that just today, prior to making this video, I went back onto Amazon, onto the reviews, and I'm not the only one that found the same problem. Other buyers of it said, nice tool, it just isn't accurate. So I guess what you could do, if you wanted to put a valve shim or something under your retainer, make some kind of a shim to adjust for it. It's off like 60 thousandths of an inch or so. So obviously not a good deal. So I ended up doing all the rest of these valves the old way. So get my out of there. Okay, the next thing is it didn't come with seals, so the solution to that is these little we used to call them perfect circle seals. I'm sure these aren't made by Perfect Circle. But if you're going to use an open spring like this where you don't have a shield, you need to use this kind of a seal that goes right over the... Unfortunately, the bosses are machined for this. On the OEM heads, they actually aren't. These World Products 1-1-052 are supposedly a stock or a aftermarket replacement head for the original so-called double bumper fuel injection heads that came on Corvettes and 350 horse, 327s, etc., Z28s, etc. So to get this guy on is pretty simple. Just push that down. I got a little tool here. Push it on as far as it goes. There you go. That's all there is to it. Put the spring back on and we're good to go. So what have we checked out so far? We know the leak down is acceptable. It's okay. The valves did not have valve seals, but it does now. We fixed that problem. We know the installed height. We know the important thing of installed height is there's a spec somewhere, and I don't have it for World Products. But at the installed height, what force is it put on your springs, on your valve lifters, okay? And the force is 100, 110 pounds with the valve closed, and 100 or 280 or so with it open. Those numbers are pretty good. And so these springs will work just fine. So before I forget, good friend of mine, Gary Watson, just had a birthday a couple days ago. So shout out to Gary, happy birthday, strong supporter. Gary's 350 Nova engine is the first engine that I ever dynoed, and I sold it to him probably 4 or 5 years ago now. So hats off to him, and happy birthday, Gary. Also, I mentioned Brian Hambley in his class. Brian Hambley is a good buddy of mine who moved to North Carolina building NASCAR engines. And we're going to put a screenshot of Brian's class in Forsyth College. I said Charlotte. It's not. It's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, not far away from there. And these guys are learning how to build race car engines from Brian, and pay attention to him, guys. You will learn a lot by doing that because he knows what he's talking about. So. Okay, so I think we've covered off. So what's going to happen? We're going to use these heads. They're going to have seals on them. This head's got to come back off. Once again, it's just mocked up. Same process as this one. check every installed height of the springs, put seals on it, and then I'm going to bolt it on the engine. We are going to use 15 thousandths of an inch thick stainless steel head gaskets. We're going to paint them with this stuff, Permatex spray gasket. And you know, in this business, you do a lot of things to help. Sometimes they're not necessary, and sometimes you're not sure if they help, but you do them anyway. And the more good things that you do, the more likely you're going to have a good outcome. So I am going to spray these with spray gasket, and spray the head gaskets with spray gasket, put it back together, get it running again, and we're going to dyno this engine. Haven't got a dyno date yet, so we're working on that. So back to my tip of the day. I mentioned at the beginning these engines were designed by some pretty smart guys, and if you want to outsmart them, you better do your homework. So a couple things. I guess the most important thing is you have to learn to do is to think for yourself. Don't do anything just because somebody tells you, even if it's me. Okay, you can do your own homework nowadays with artificial intelligence, Bing, YouTube, all other forms of the internet, forums. You can do the homework and the research yourself and learn about almost anything that you want to learn about. When I was starting out 60 years ago, I bought Hot Rod magazine every month. I read manuals. Fortunately, I worked at a Texaco garage with a really good mechanic that invested and mentored me. Not everybody has that opportunity, and that certainly helped me a lot. But nowadays, you don't even need all that. You have a lot more sources of information. Do your own homework. Avoid the myths. This industry is just, because it's so complex and there's so many people having input in so many ways, there have been so many myths developed over the years, and people just do stuff because they think it's right. Think about it for yourself and make sure that you're making a good decision that's in your interest. Avoid marketing. The guys that design most of that stuff that gets marketed are pretty smart guys. And then they hand it over to marketers to sell it for them, and they'll tell you just about anything to get you to buy it. So it's kind of like brainwashing. A lot of times the product's good, you do need it, you can apply it, and it'll do just what you expect. But you got to do your own homework to make sure that's true. And then planning. Before you start a project, if you can't sit down and write down line by line everything that you have to do in that process of completing that project, you're probably not ready to do it. Okay, and while you're at it, make a budget. If you haven't got a very detailed budget, when you get all done, double what the budget is. It's probably going to be realistic. And one last thing, if you're designing an engine, the first thing you want to calculate is the compression, because that's going to determine what cylinder heads you use, what pistons you use, what piston deck clearance you're going to use, what gaskets you're going to use. So figure that out first. It's easy to do and free to do. There's formulas online that you can do. The end result you're looking for is compression, pressure, PSI, by a gauge that you can put in your head yourself and measure. That's what you're aiming at. Start there, and that's your end point, is satisfying that requirement. So the last thing is be realistic about your expectations. Okay, coming up, by the way, on Gold Scratch, before we close off, more videos on this engine. When I get the heads on it and get it running, when I get a dyno date. We have a dyno date in December for Will's engine. I think it's December the 9th or 10th. And it'll be done by then. And we'll have more videos when I get the pistons, confirming the deck height, confirming the quench. As it goes together, I will try to make a video of installing the cam bearings and explain the logic of how I install cam bearings, installing the camshaft, and basically completing the engine, getting it running on the test stand, and then taking it to the dyno. This engine is also going to go to the dyno when we get it complete. I haven't got a date right now. The Pontiac video, Joe's getting all the parts machined for me right now. It's got to get done, so if you have anything that you'd like to see me do on Gold Scratch, put it in the comments. And then speaking of comments, the recent video that we did on balancing, do you need a balance or not, the end of last week, not even a week ago, controversial video, caused a lot of interest. Not everybody agrees with me, and that's just fine. That's the nature of this kind of work, and you're entitled to that. But if you haven't watched it already, it's got lots of good reviews and real good numbers, and certainly created some interest. So check that out as well. And once again, if you got any ideas, just let me know. And thank you for watching Gold's Garage.